Pandu's Season, chapter excerpt, titled Gravity. Pandu held his hands up for his face to see. They were ever aching and weary, the hands of an old man. From where did this transformation arise? He glanced down at his feet, to the place he sensed his sting. Their experience felt very far from the rest of him, detached even. Above he felt the constellations dissolving, and his head dizzying. Every part of him felt heavy and separate, and obstructed by gravity. Leaning, he let it take him, till the back of his head reached stone. Pandu did not sleep long, yet however brief his sleep, it was filled with the immediacy of dream. When he woke, he felt an intense aloneness. He felt as alone as one feels when overhearing a friend's whisper that one is not meant to hear. An emptiness filled him. Was this even possible? To be filled by emptiness? The sun was there in its whiteness, and no longer soothed his shoulders as before. There was nothing pure about it any more, as he came to realize it was full of corruption, full of color. He could still taste the green from the stream, and so he tried his best to expel what he could. Why was the world trying to poison him? Why should the soil and sun seek to punish? Pandu wanted to move, but felt he could not. He wanted to roam, but he'd become obstructed by boundary. Everything, even his observation, labored beneath the press of his own weight. Everything had heavied since his arrival. Then, amid the stream, near its opposite side, a savage materialized. Through the small patch of thicket and sprigs, he had arrived from whatever universe lived on the other side. Pandu, too fearful to move, remained silent. The savage carried a sack across his shoulder and appeared to be a villager or peddler with modest offerings, despite his threat. From where could he have spawned when there were no villages, no cottages, no customs? Pandu watched the savage stand midstream for a time. He did not appear interested in direction or navigation, but instead seemed content in his stance, with a sack slung over his side. Then the savage smiled and lifted his hand in gesture. Just who was he signaling, and what did it all mean? Pandu looked to his left, averting his gaze upon his sharpened weapon. Ever since he'd been receiving poisonous deliveries, he felt that no part of the world could be completely trusted. He glanced back at the intruder, who remained standing and smiling this entire time. Careful not to startle, Pandu quietly reached for his weapon. It had taken him nearly a full day to sharpen it, wherein he accidentally stabbed part of his hand as a result. The wound, now dulled with blood, still smarted. Pandu didn't know how quick he could be despite his injury, but what little stance he had, he needed. The savage seemed to smile out of duty. Pandu displayed the weapon before him and then screamed. Expecting the intruder to dash away, Pandu was surprised when he did not. This time, more forcefully, Pandu stood and imposed his warning, holding his weapon above his head. And just as every other part of him, it too had grown heavier than what he remembered. Pandu waited for the intruder's reaction, but the savage merely laughed instead. Was he mocking him? Why was he not frightened? Pandu wobbled over several stones as he managed to remain standing despite his aching feet. The savage removed his sack from his shoulder and inserted his hand within. Fearful that the intruder could be reaching for a weapon, Pandu reacted with an immediacy and forced his way through the modest distance between them. Such aggression finally secured the intruder's attention, and he backed away without hesitation. Pandu continued imposing himself until the savage turned away, vanishing quickly into the grove. Satisfied, Pandu felt he'd achieved his final act of something. He did not know its significance, but he felt himself momentarily safe once again regardless. Upon one of the stones was the object the savage had reached for when sifting through his bag. Careful at first, Pandu examined it with the tip of his weapon and found it to be a yam. From where could it have come? Puzzled, Pandu navigated through the might of the current until eventually reaching the opposite side, to the very spot the savage stood only moments ago. He peeked through the trees in his attempt to uncover something. For the rest of the day he remained dissatisfied and unsure. Pandu carried the yam back to his shelter, where he then displayed it upon a stone directly in its center as some sacrificial offering. He watched and waited for it to misbehave in some way, but it did nothing, as it was only a yam. Still, Pandu did not trust its source, and so once nightfall came, he thrust the brunt of his blade into the dangerous vegetable. That same night, sleep could not find him again. Pandu realized he was no longer safe in this habitat. The atmosphere he had come to trust had deceived him. Misleading and full of pretense, why was it pretending? Was it similar to his father's forced love, a love that had been composed more of chemical reaction and obligation than general affection? He used to find that comforting, the thought of a parent's love being immediate and guaranteed upon conception. Was not nature very much the same? Pandu wondered, what now remained? What were this savage's motives, and why exactly did he wish to ruin him? Why did this intruder wish to destroy his sanity, his purity, his peace? Nature was no longer clean, but corrupt in all its coloring. Paralyzing and predatory, its wickedness had been undone. Pandu would never be welcomed, not by it or by anyone. All will devolve to vapor in its eventual hour. Even the cosmos had its customs, an interminable place of non-belonging.